The gravel crunched under my tires, and then I saw it. A sold sign staked into the front lawn of the house I grew up in. My chest went tight. I hadn't put that house on the market. I hadn't signed anything, and my brother hadn't said a word. I sat in my car for a long time before I could even open the door. The porch light was off. The curtains were different. Someone else's welcome mat sat where ours used to be. 28 years of my life lived inside those walls, and I found out it was gone from a real estate sign on the side of the road. My name is Danny. I'm 43 years old, and for most of my life, I thought family meant something solid, something you could stand on. That house on Maple Street taught me otherwise, and it took losing it to understand what it had actually meant to me. I grew up in that house with my younger brother, Ryan. Our dad built the back porch with his own hands the summer I turned 9. I remember handing him nails while he hummed old country songs under his breath. Mom kept a garden along the side fence, tomatoes and marigolds, and every June the whole yard smelled like sun and dirt and something growing. That kitchen table saw every birthday, every Thanksgiving, every report card, good and bad. I learned to ride a bike in that driveway. I broke my arm falling off the shed roof trying to impress a girl from down the street. Ryan and I shared a room until I was 14, and even after I moved into the basement, I could still hear him talking to himself through the floor vents at night. Our parents weren't rich. Dad worked at the plant for 31 years. Mom did books for a local accountant. But that house was paid for with real sweat, and it held every version of our family that ever existed. When Dad passed, we held the funeral reception in that living room. When Mom passed 6 years later, Ryan and I stood on that porch and made a promise to each other. We said we'd never let the house go. We said it belonged to both of us, no matter what. I want you to remember that promise, because it matters for what comes later. After Mom's funeral, Ryan and I agreed to keep the house as a kind of shared inheritance. Neither of us wanted to live in it full time, but neither of us could stand the thought of selling it either. We split the property taxes. We took turns mowing the lawn and fixing the gutters. I lived 2 hours away with my wife and our son, so Ryan, who lived just 15 minutes from Maple Street, handled most of the day-to-day stuff. That made sense at the time. I trusted him completely. Looking back now, there were signs. Small things I brushed off because I didn't want to believe them. About 8 months before I found that sign, Ryan stopped answering my calls as quickly as he used to. He used to call me back the same day. Then it became 2 days. Then a week. When we did talk, he seemed distracted, short with me, like he was rushing to get off the phone. He also stopped sending me pictures of the house. For years, every time he mowed the lawn or fixed something, he'd send me a quick photo. Dad's old tool shed, the porch swing, whatever. Then those stopped too. I told myself he was just busy. He had 2 kids in travel sports and a job that had him working weekends. Then there was the afternoon I drove past on my way to a client meeting and noticed a car in the driveway I didn't recognize. Not Ryan's truck, not a neighbor's car I knew. I called him that night and asked about it. He said it was a friend helping him fix the water heater. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? The last warning sign came about 6 weeks before everything fell apart. I asked Ryan if we could talk about eventually renovating the kitchen, something small, updating the cabinets that hadn't been touched since 1994. He got strange on the phone. Quiet. Then he said, "Let's not put money into it right now. Let's just see how things go." I didn't understand what that meant. I do now. The day I found the sign, I called Ryan 4 times. No answer. I called his wife, Michelle. No answer. I sat in that driveway of a house that wasn't mine anymore, and I felt something crack open in my chest that I can only describe as pure disbelief. I got out of the car. I walked up to the porch, half expecting someone to yell at me for trespassing. The new owners weren't there yet, I guess, because the house still sat empty, boxes of someone else's belongings stacked near the front door. I looked through the window into the living room where we held Mom's funeral reception, and it was already stripped down to bare walls. ready for a new family to fill it with their own memories. I stood in that driveway staring at the empty porch. The old swing my father built was gone. For the first time in my life, that house no longer felt like home. It felt like a stranger's house wearing my childhood's face. I drove straight to Ryan's place. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel the entire way. When I pulled up, his truck was in the driveway, but nobody answered the door for almost 5 minutes. When Ryan finally opened it, he looked like a man who'd been expecting this exact moment and dreading it for weeks. "We need to talk," I said. He stepped outside instead of inviting me in. That told me something too. "How could you sell it without even calling me?" I asked him. My voice cracked, which embarrassed me, but I didn't care anymore. Ryan rubbed the back of his neck, a habit he's had since he was a kid whenever he got caught doing something wrong. "It's complicated, Danny." "It's not complicated. It's our parents' house. You sold it behind my back." "You weren't around," he said. "You live 2 hours away. I'm the one dealing with everything here." That stung, because there was a small piece of truth buried in it, but it didn't the deeper wound. "That doesn't give you the right to sell it without telling me. We made a promise to each other on that porch." He looked away from me, out toward the street like he couldn't hold my eyes. "There's stuff going on you don't know about." That sentence right there changed the whole conversation. I felt the ground shift under me again. "What stuff?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Michelle came to the door then, saw the look on both our faces, and quietly went back inside. Ryan finally said, "Can we sit down? This isn't a driveway conversation." We ended up at a diner a few blocks away, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that's been sitting too long. Ryan wouldn't look at me for the first few minutes. Then he started talking, and everything I thought I understood about my family started coming apart. He told me he'd been struggling financially for almost 2 years. His construction business took a hit during a slow stretch, and he'd taken out a loan against his own house to keep it afloat. When that wasn't enough, he started missing payments. Then, about a year ago, he quietly used the Maple Street house as collateral for a second loan, one he never told me about, one that had both our names on the property, but only his signature on the paperwork, because he'd forged a power of attorney using an old document Mom had signed years earlier for unrelated medical decisions. I sat there in that booth feeling like the floor had opened up beneath me. "You forged Mom's documents." "I didn't think it would go this far," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I'd catch up on payments before anyone noticed. I thought I'd tell you eventually once I fixed it." "Once you fixed it," I repeated. "Ryan, you sold our parents' house." "The bank was going to take it anyway," he said. "I had 30 days before foreclosure on the loan. Selling it was the only way to walk away with anything instead of losing it completely and still owing money." I wanted to be angry. I was angry. But underneath the anger was something worse, a grief I hadn't expected, because in that moment I understood my brother hadn't just betrayed me. He'd been drowning for 2 years, and instead of reaching out, he built a wall and let me lose the house without ever giving me a chance to help. "Why didn't you just tell me you needed money?" I asked. "I would have helped you. We could have figured something out together." Ryan's eyes filled up, and I hadn't seen my brother cry since Dad's funeral. "Because I was ashamed," he said. "You always had it together. Good job, good marriage, good life. I couldn't stand the thought of you knowing I was failing." I didn't say anything for a while. The waitress came by and refilled coffee neither of us was drinking. I thought about all those missed calls, the photos that stopped coming, the strange car in the driveway that was probably a mortgage broker or an appraiser, not a friend fixing a water heater. "There's something else," Ryan said, and my stomach tightened again, because I knew by now that whenever he said those words, something painful followed. He told me that when he sold the house, he didn't just cover the loan. He kept a portion of the profit for himself, money he said he needed to catch up on his own mortgage and keep his business running. He hadn't set aside my half. Not because he planned to steal it, he insisted, but because there wasn't enough left once the loan and fees were paid. I felt something in me go cold and still. So the house is gone, and there's no money for me either. I'm going to pay you back, he said. I swear to you, Danny, every dollar. I left the diner that night without finishing my coffee and without saying goodbye. I drove home in silence, no radio, just my own thoughts crashing into each other. My wife, Corinne, was waiting up for me. When I told her everything, she didn't say a word for a long time. She just held my hand across the kitchen table while I stared at nothing. Over the next few weeks, I consulted with a lawyer, mostly out of anger, wanting to understand what my options were. The lawyer confirmed that Ryan's actions were serious. Forging a power of attorney is a real crime, not just a family dispute. I could have pursued charges. I could have sued him for my share of the proceeds. Part of me wanted to. Part of me wanted him to feel even a fraction of what I felt standing in that driveway, looking at a stranger's boxes through our mother's living room window. But another part of me kept thinking about something Mom used to say. She'd tell us, family isn't about being perfect with each other. It's about staying anyway. I didn't know if I could stay after this. I didn't know if staying was even the right thing to do. I gave myself a month before making any decisions. During that month, I didn't talk to Ryan much. A few short texts, nothing real. I spent a lot of that time driving past where the house used to be, which probably wasn't healthy, but I couldn't stop myself. I watched the new owners start moving in. A young couple with a dog and a toddler. Watching strangers build new memories in the place where I'd built mine felt like grief with no funeral to mark it. About 5 weeks after that diner conversation, Ryan showed up at my house unannounced. Corinne let him in, though I could tell she wasn't thrilled about it. He sat across from me at my kitchen table, and he looked smaller than I remembered, worn down in a way that wasn't just about money. He slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a check, not for the full amount he owed me, but a real chunk of it, along with a handwritten letter explaining a payment plan for the rest, month by month, with actual numbers and dates, not vague promises. I sold my truck, he said. The good one. I'm driving the old one now. I also picked up weekend work on top of my regular job. I know this doesn't fix what I did, but I need you to know I'm not running from it anymore. I looked at that check for a long time. Money wasn't really the point anymore, not fully. What mattered more was that he showed up. He didn't wait for me to come to him. He didn't make excuses this time. He just put in the work. Why didn't you do this from the beginning? I asked. Why the forgery? Why the secrecy, instead of just telling me you were in trouble? Because admitting I was failing felt worse than losing the house, he said. I know that doesn't make sense from the outside, but shame does strange things to people. It convinces you that hiding the problem is easier than facing the people who love you. I thought about that for a long time after he left that night. I thought about how many people carry secrets like that, drowning quietly instead of asking for a hand, because pride and shame convince them it's safer to disappear than to be seen struggling. I didn't forgive him that night. I want to be honest about that because this isn't a story about instant forgiveness. It took months. It took him following through on every single payment, even the small ones. It took him showing up to my son's baseball games again, something he'd stopped doing during the 2 years he was struggling. It took real, consistent effort, not just words. About 8 months after that day, I found the sign in the yard. Ryan and I drove past the old house together. We didn't plan it. We were driving back from our uncle's place and just ended up on that street. The new owners had painted the shutters blue. They'd put up a swing set in the backyard where Dad's porch swing used to be. It looked different. It looked like someone else's life now. We sat in the car for a while, just looking at it. I used to think that house was what made us a family, I said. Like if we lost it, we'd lose that too. Ryan didn't say anything at first. Then he said, I think I sold the house because some part of me thought I already lost that family feeling. Like the house wasn't really home anymore after Mom died. I don't know. That's not an excuse, just something I've been thinking about. I understood what he meant, even if I didn't fully agree. That house held our history, but it wasn't the reason we were brothers. It wasn't the reason our parents loved us or the reason we loved each other when we actually let ourselves. We ended up telling our kids stories about that house instead, since we couldn't take them there anymore. My son loved hearing about the tool shed roof incident. Ryan's daughter loved the story about the garden and the marigolds. In a strange way, the house became more alive in our memories once it was gone, because we finally started talking about it instead of just living quietly beside it. Ryan finished paying me back completely about a year and 2 months after that day in the driveway. He didn't have to remind me or announce it. He just made the last payment, and afterward he called me not to talk about money but just to talk, about nothing important. Work, kids, an old movie we used to watch together as teenagers. It felt, for the first time in a long while, like we were just brothers again, not a debtor and a creditor, not a liar and a victim. I never pursued legal action against him. I know some people would have made a different choice, and I don't judge anyone who would. But watching my brother rebuild himself, piece by piece, taught me something I couldn't have learned any other way. Real accountability doesn't come from punishment. It comes from someone choosing, every single day, to keep showing up and doing the work, even when it's hard, even when no one's forcing them to. These days, Ryan and I are close again. Not exactly the way we were before, because you can't fully go back to something once it's broken, but maybe closer in some ways, because now we actually talk about the hard things instead of pretending everything's fine. I still think about that house sometimes. I think about the porch swing and the smell of Mom's tomatoes in June and the sound of Dad humming while he worked. I used to think losing that house meant losing my family's foundation. Now I understand the foundation was never really the walls or the porch or the address on Maple Street. The foundation was always the people. And people, unlike houses, can be rebuilt if you're willing to do the work and if you're willing to forgive, not because someone deserves it right away, but because holding onto anger forever costs you more than it ever costs them. If there's one thing I'd want anyone listening to this to take with them, it's this. If you're struggling, say something before it becomes a secret too big to carry alone. And if someone you love hurts you deeply, give them the chance to become someone better, not because it erases what happened, but because people, real people, are always more valuable than any house, any money, or any piece of property could ever be. Home was never really an address. Home was always us.